I am hunched over the old console, the night outside the telescope a velvet bruise, rain tapping a patient rhythm on the dome. The whisperer hums at the edge of perception, translating faint radio static into a voice I can almost swear is human. My hands are cold, the coffee tasted years old, and the lab's fluorescent lights buzz like cicadas in winter. I am Elias Voss, once a seeker of pure physics, now a keeper of lost voices. Mara Chen, my newest apprentice, sits across from me, notebook open, eyes bright with the stubborn faith of someone who believes we might finally answer the question that keeps us up. What if there are stories in starlight that aren't about galaxies, but about us? Theo Reed, the night watchman turned loyal friend, leans against a rack of solar panels, listening for a sound that isn't there to listen back. And there, between us and the sky, the whisperer begins to tell its patient tales again, as if the stars themselves have dust on their lips and nothing but stories to speak. Before this moment, I believed the universe was a ledger with equations instead of receipts. I believed that if you could hear enough signals, isolate enough photons, you could quantify a life. People's choices, their courage, their heartbreak mere data points to place on a chart that would prove us right about something. The truth was simpler and more ridiculous. I was hoarding other people's turning points like shells on a shelf, swapping them for nothing of my own truth. My hands trembled a little when I spoke in front of Mara, the way old men tremble when they ask the world to listen to their notes about the weather they remember from their youth. I used to think listening to their stories would remind me how brave I was, how steady my own heart could remain if I simply catalogued enough lives. I missed that the stars don't want to be catalogued, they want to be heard. The first star says its name in a whisper that sounds like the sharp hiss of static against an old vinyl record. Captain Mateo's voice squeezes through, a storm-worn man who once steered a vessel through a night that had swallowed the horizon. The star tells me Mateo diverted his path, not toward the harbor because of shore lights, but toward the deeper current, toward a reef nobody saw, until it clipped the hull of a smaller boat carrying a mother, her newborn, and a bottle of clean water The crew had almost traded for a prayer. The memory lands in my chest like a cold coin. The feel of rope under your hands, the roughness of the deck, the way rain tastes when you've forgotten to swallow and must swallow again. The sea's voice says you don't survive a night like that by chance. You survive because someone listened to the faintest suggestion from the dark and let it change your course. Then Nadia's memory slides into the room. A nurse with hair cut sharp at the jawline, steady like a lighthouse in a black corridor. The star's thread tail says Nadia paused a risky delivery, listened to the clock on the wall, and followed a small impulse that arrived as rain on the patient's chest. Nothing dramatic, just a breath she held and a breath she gave back. A choice to stay when everyone else suggested sprinting. A choice that saved a life who would have slipped away into the next patient's pulse of pain. The room fills with the scent of antiseptic and old coffee, a memory of towels and warm hands, and I feel the weight of the moment, not a dramatic rescue, but a quiet, stubborn fidelity to the human moment that isn't supposed to matter until it does, and then matters forever. Priya's turn comes next. A student with a backpack of books and fear, and a stubbornly bright future looming behind her eyelids. The star speaks with a calm, the way a lighthouse keeps vigil for ships that will never be brave enough to admit they need a light. Priya's star nudges her toward a scholarship she nearly talked herself out of because she believed she wasn't worthy, because the numbers in the computer predicted failure, because the grown-up part of her was afraid of happiness in case it dissolved into disappointment. The star's memory is a map of a life you didn't know you were allowed to want. And when Priya turns the page and applies anyway, I feel a line in my chest loosen, a rusted lever finally coming free. The room tilts just enough for me to lean into it and listen for the first time without guilt, without the need to solve or explain every blueprint of a person's hope. And then there's a memory I've invited into my rooms before, and I've learned to pretend isn't there. My own. The star's voice softens, but the tension in the air thickens. The last tale isn't of another person's choice, but of a moment in my past when I chose to look away. My mother, long gone in a way that feels like wind through a window that was never opened, once told me to listen for what isn't obvious. I heard the words blind to their meaning, and I chose the safer path. Measure, record, file away, go back to the desk where the numbers wait. The star gently places its finger on the exact point where I stopped listening to love, because I assumed I could fix the world with a perfectly calibrated model. The second to last story lands with a sudden brightness. A fisherman's sister who saved a net full of school children by steering a boat into a fog bank when a fog horn failed. The star says, "You saved them by choosing fear over faith, by trusting a mist to clear long enough that the kids could lock their hands with one another and walk toward the safer shore with someone else's courage held in their mouths." It's a memory I know too well, the moment when a life turns on a hinge you didn't even know was there. When you realize the truth you've been measuring is not the truth you've lived. The room grows heavy with the ache of all the doors I've closed to protect the self I believed I was supposed to be. Doors slammed so hard the hinges remember the sound of a future I never opened. The voices recede, leaving a silence that is almost ceremonial. The last star is a quiet, intimate sound, the kind of whisper a person saves for their own inward audience. It's my own memory now, or perhaps it's the memory I've kept from myself for decades. In that hush, I hear my mother's voice, not the polite one I learned to correct, not the one that told me to stay safe, but the raw, plain words she spoke when my fear was too loud to bear, and I did not want to listen. You are needed when you choose to listen, not when you are certain you know the answer. The star's tone dips into the memory and holds it there, as if saying, "Look at this. This is your turning point you've refused to name." And then, in a blink of a breath, the moment lands, the 5-second moment that changes everything. I realize that these stars haven't given me a ledger of strangers' lives to prove my own intellect. They've been insisting on something dangerous and fragile, that I, Elias Voss, am woven into the same fabric as those who listened when it mattered most. These stories aren't about the people in them. They're about the moment a person chooses to hear, and the way that choice travels forward through a daughter's memory, through a nurse's steady hands, through a captain's stubborn course, through a student's brave application. In that instant, I know I have been listening in the wrong key, recording the wrong kind of life, and I feel the shift like a door unlatching inside me. The stars are not done with me. They've only just begun teaching me how to listen to what I have always refused to hear. My own story is a thread in the same tapestry, and it deserves a listening, too. The moment ends with a breath, and the room seems suddenly larger, somehow closer. Mara's pencil hovers, Theo exhales, the whisperer settles into a softer, more forgiving hum. I sit very still, tasting the cold coffee on my tongue and the steadiness of my own heartbeat, and I realize I will reach out tonight, not because I should, but because I must, because the night is asking me to tell a truth that I have kept locked behind a door I believed was locked to protect others. The stars have spoken, and I have finally decided to listen.